What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Pens and Tea. My name is Carrie, and today we're going to be talking broad strokes about the difference between pilot nibs and sailor nibs. Now, you're going to notice that I'm a little skewed in my preference, and it's not necessarily my overall preference. It's just that this happens to be the only sailor that I actually own. If you go back through my channel, I have done reviews on like 5 other sailors, so I've got pretty good experience with them. I just happen to own and actually keep pilots, and not so much on the sailor front, which we'll get into in a little bit, but I have used many sailors in my day. So even though I only have one to show you, I still know what I'm talking about. The other caveat I will say before we dive deep into this is that this is going to be a bit broad, mostly because there are some nibs like this one, which is the Pilot Falcon. This is on the 912. I won't be talking about this because I've never used a Sailor Flex nib. I don't even know if they make them. I also won't be talking about their Pilot Metropolitan because it is a very different experience to the mainstay of pilots, although I've done many reviews on this and I love it, which is why I still own it. And I do think that this is a better fit than Sailor's Compass, which just came out not too long ago, I think 2 years ago, which is sort of like, I think, their call to this level pen, even though it's more expensive, but I prefer the Metropolitan. So these two pens I will keep out of the discussion for the most part. Really, I'm just going to be focusing on the gold nibs, which Sailor gets complicated again because they have both the 14 karat and 21 karat gold nibs. Again, I've used both. This one happens to be a 21 karat, whereas Pilot is pretty much all 14. So you can see, well, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but that's 14. And then these both are the same pens. They're just different nib sizes. Yeah, it's hard for you guys to see, but they're both 14s. So they pretty much stick in that 14 range. No one else that I'm aware of has a 21K, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there was. But to be honest, between 14 and 21, you're nicking it like little tiny hairs. Like, there's really not much of a difference in my experience. But that's just me. Of course, there's always the one-offs that could be significantly different. But in general, and that's basically where we're going to be living, in general, there are some main differences that I have noticed in my personal use of them. So broad strokes, I'll just say this so that if you want to just quit and run after this and end the video here, you can. If you do want to stick around, I will be getting into some writing samples in a little bit, but broad strokes, Sailor nibs tend to be stiffer than Pilot. And I don't mean stiffer in the sense of line variation. Again, that's not what these pens are for. My favorite analogy is basically like a shock absorber. So with Pilot, you will get a little bit of a bounce when you're writing. It doesn't feel quite like you're writing with a stiff nail of a nib. So if like a TWSBI pen is your jam, or like a platinum pen, especially the 3776, if you love those, then a Sailor might be better for you. If you don't really love those, then a Pilot might be better for you. They have a bit more of a personality when you write with them. There's just, a bit of a shock absorber feel. If you want a fine line, like a super fine line, Sailor does definitely have this slight edge on that, and I think it is because you don't have that shock absorber. So, even with pressure with your hand, you still really get a fine line. This is a medium fine, by the way. You still get a really fine line. Whereas with Pilot, even with their fine, and don't get me wrong, their fine nibs are very fine. Very fine. I've never used the ultra extra fine anywhere, so I don't know what that would be like. But their fine nibs are definitely fine. I mean, look at that. So you do, again, get a very, very fine line, but because you have slight, and I mean slight on the fine, give, it responds a little bit more to your pressure. So if you write a little bit more heavy-handed, especially since this pen in particular happens to be the 823, it does have a little bit more weight, you can widen that line a little bit. So if you want, again, a harder writing experience that will stick to its line and not really give you much variation there, a Sailor might be the way to go. Now, when you get out of the extra fine and fine territory where they're sort of on par with each other, the mediums and the broads certainly are a little bit bigger on Pilot than they are Sailor. Sailor also makes I think Pilot makes a music nib too, but I've never used it. But they also make a zoom nib. They have crazy specialty nibs, and oh boy, do you pay for it. So I'm not going to talk about those crazy guys. I'm just talking about mediums and broads, keeping it basically between extra fine and broad with the main nib range. Pilot's medium is certainly a beefy medium. And I've had that across the board with both of their sizes. So the Custom 74 and the Custom 823 obviously use different nib sizes. This is their size 5. This is their size 10. They do have another pen that has a bigger nib than this, which I've used but never really had a ton of experience with. But these are the main sizes that you'll see across the board. With mediums and broads, they are a little bit bigger than Sailor, so they do write a little bit more medium and broad, closer to a European. Still not as chunky as a European, and I do find that the size 5 mediums are bigger than the size 10 mediums, but not by a ton. It's just kind of random. Most of the Sailors that I've used, excuse me, have been either fine or medium. And like I said, this one happens to be a medium fine. I've used the Sailor broad and zoom nibs before. So again, if you're curious, I have tons of those videos up on my channel if you want to see those. But I don't own any of them because they just don't fit into my writing style. So I'm going to get these guys out of the way. These are the 823s because I have this one currently inked up. And we're going to do a bit of a writing sample. So I'm just going to put this guy aside for a moment. And I'm going to get out my Galen Leather Tomoe River notebook, just so you all know what I am writing on. Ink, I have found, doesn't play too much of a factor with the width size. Some inks do tend to spread more than others, but that's really the ink's problem, not the pen's problem. But on Tomoe River, you really don't have that. Sorry, I wasn't putting my pen down. So this is the Pilot Custom. This writing is not good. I don't know why my hand decides to just not work right now. And this is their medium nib. So no pressure. Some pressure. It's by no means a flex nib. It's certainly not what it is made to do, but it does have wiggle room. So while you're writing, it feels like it's responding to you. Like if you're having an angry day, a frustrated day, it will respond to that pressure and give you sort of that shock absorbing feel. And I struggle every time I talk about this pen. If you've watched like any of my reviews on it, I struggle to like properly describe what this feels. Some people in the comment section, say that their nib feels like squishy, which I guess I can understand, but I don't know. I like the shock absorber feel. That's to me what pops into my brain. And I really enjoy it. And it's certainly a very, very wet pen. But that's really more down to the feed than it is the actual nib. Now, I don't know if you can hear that because the mic is fairly far away, but I mean, you can tell that it is a finer line. At least I hope you can. But it is very stiff. Like you have to put tons of pressure to get any line variation. You still can, but when you're writing, I don't feel like I get that expression from it. The inks, by the way, in case you were curious, because I know I'm actually going to get asked, in the Pilot is Montegrappa Harry Potter Ravenclaw Blue, sample from Pen Chalet. And then in the Sailor, yes, it's open. I'm living large. Mont Blanc Toffee Brown. I don't feel like I get that shock absorber feel. Both of them are very smooth, although I do have to caveat that this nib I did have taken care of for me because when I purchased it secondhand, it was very, very scratchy and just wasn't pleased with it. It was scratchy, dry, misaligned, and no bueno. So I did have it taken care of, but the other Sailors I've used are pretty smooth. I would say that they are a little more feedbacky with the fines, and it's certainly the extra fines by comparison to Pilots. Pilots tend to be like a little bit smoother in my opinion, but by no means is it scratchy. Like for example, the Platinum 3776 has a lot of feedback and tooth, but it's not scratch. Like it's not because the tines are misaligned or anything like that. So I think for me, like for the most part, Pilot does take the cake over Sailor for me. But that said, I love this pen, which is why I still have it. Because I really do like the way that this writes. I just find that I gravitate more towards Pilot than I do Sailor. So I would say in general, very broad strokes here. I'll zoom out a little so you can see the whole thing. In general, if you want a slightly stiffer writing experience, slightly finer writing experience until you get into the mediums and then you are almost on even keel, then I would go with a Sailor. If you want something that's a little bit more expressive, that is a little bit, softer, again, not flex wise, just, I cannot explain it. Please help me out in the comment section down below, like coming up with like acronyms or ways to explain it. Something that, like just has like that shock absorber feel. Definitely go with Pilot. Like I said, I tend to prefer Pilot, but I will probably never sell this Sailor Pro gear, not only because I love the color of it, but it just writes so well. I love both of them. I think that they both serve a very different purpose. So despite the fact that they're both, Japanese style nibs, they both serve a different purpose. Like I will say with the Pilot Fine nibs, on their upstrokes, they tend to be a little drier than on their downstrokes, whereas Sailor doesn't have that. Sailor's pretty good either way. Where like this is a medium, so I don't really get it as much, but it is a little bit drier on their upstrokes. I happen to love that because you don't notice it a ton in your actual writing until you do something like this where it like stands out like a sore thumb. Yeah, you can kind of see there better a little bit. But in your actual writing, it brings out a little bit more shading in inks that don't necessarily shade, which I personally really like. I know based on the comment section in other videos, some people don't like that at all. So keep that in mind as well if you've never used either a Pilot or a Sailor nib before. So yeah, I would say if you're brand spanking new to Japanese nibs, you've never used them before, but you want to get into one, the smoothest transition, like if you're used to European pens, the smoothest transition, I would say go with a medium Pilot. And then if you like that, then transition either into a Sailor, like medium fine to medium. And then they're, like I said, they're relatively even keel on Sailor and Pilot with their fine nibs and extra fine nibs. If you've tried both, just decide which one you like better. But that's my general. I'm trying to stay very broad in this topic because there are a lot of specificities between, the pens themselves, the nibs themselves. So I'm just sort of speaking broad terms, overall experience. I'm sure if you check the comment section down below, there are going to be plenty of people who have the same experience and different experiences as me. But yeah, let me know down in the comment section below if you've had anything like that. If you're shopping for a Pilot or a Sailor, definitely check down below as well for other people's opinions, because this is just one. So I'm starting to ramble now, so I'm going to call it a day here. Say just hit that like button if you liked it. Hit the subscribe if you want to see more every Monday and Friday and the occasional Tuesday. Hit up my Patreon account if you want to help support me in what I do here. And as always, I appreciate you. Thank you for spending, almost 20 minutes with me. And as always, I'll see you next time. Bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to thank all of my VIP and above patrons. This was filmed May 2nd, so if you don't see your name and you've just started supporting me, don't worry. It will appear as soon as I can update it. So we have Mr. Daniel Roddy, we have Elizabeth, Glenn Kelly, Joan Worthman, Brian Hunter, Aaron C., Luna Wolf Games, Bobby A. Bailey, Bass, Whaley Chang, Brian Law, Lucas Bell, Aubrey Madcore, Marissa Calvo, Eric Lineman, Jessica Chow, Stephen Baldwin, Carol Lowry, Michael Simon, Sean Sturdy, Catherine Molina, Robert Myers, Bianca Andrews, Bill Pemberton, Karen Epstein, Gretchen Peters, Subiwan Kenobi, which is just the best name. She's actually presidential tier, Bianca Andrews, digitaltent.tech, and McCall Bennett Lawrence. Thank you all, regardless of the tier you choose. You will never know how much it actually means to me that you support me, my content, and what I do here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.